Alors, bonjour à tous et à toutes. Je déclare.
Good morning, one and all. Welcome to the meeting number 108 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Industry and Technology. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the standing orders and pursuant to the order of reference of Monday, April 24th, 2023. The committee is resuming consideration of Bill C-27, an act to enact the Consumer Privacy Protection Act, the Personal Information and Data Protection Tribunal Act, and the Artificial Intelligence and Data Act. I'd like to welcome our witnesses today who are all on video conference. Thanks for being here. We have Ignacio Cafoni, Canada Research Chair in AI Law and Data Governance, McGill University. Welcome. Catherine Regis, Full Professor, University of Montreal. And from the Canadian Institute for Advanced Research, Elissa Strom, Executive Director, Pan-Canadian AI Strategy. And from MILA, the Quebec Artificial Intelligence Institute, Joshua Bengio, Scientific Director. Thanks so much for being here with us. Without further ado, because we already are a little bit late, I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Ignacio Cafoni for 5 minutes. You have the floor.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for the invitation to share my thoughts of Bill C-27 with the committee. I'm appearing today in my personal capacity. Ms. Chair already introduced me, so I'm going to skip that part and say that it is crucial that Canada has a legal framework that fosters the enormous benefits of AI and data while preventing its population from becoming collateral damage from it. I'm happy to share my broad thoughts on the Act, but today I want to focus on 3 important opportunities for improvement while maintaining the general characteristics and approach of the Act as proposed. And I have 1 recommendation for ADA, 1 for the CPPA, and 1 for both. My first recommendation is that ADA needs an improved definition of harms. ADA is an accountability framework, and the effectiveness of any accountability framework depends on what it is that we hold entities accountable for. ADA recognizes currently property, economic, physical, and psychological harms, but for it to be helpful and comprehensive, we need 1 step more. Consider the harms to democracy that were imposed during the Cambridge Analytica scandal, and consider the meaningful but diffuse and invisible harms that are inflicted every day through intentional misinformation that polarizes voters and misrepresentation of minority that disempowers them. These go unrecognized by the current definition of harms. ADA needs 2 changes to recognize intangible harms beyond individual psychological ones. It needs to recognize harms to groups, such as harms to democracy, as AI harms often affect communities rather than discrete individuals. And it needs to recognize dignitary harms, like those stemming from misrepresentation and the growing of systemic inequalities through automated means. I therefore urge the committee to amend Section 5.1 of ADA to incorporate these intangible harms to individuals and to communities, and I would be happy to propose suggested language. This fuller account of harms would put Canada up to international standards, such as the EU AI Act, which consider harms to public interests, to rights protected by EU law, to a plurality of persons, and to people in a vulnerable position. Doing so better compliance with AI ethics frameworks, such as the Montreal Declaration for Responsible AI, the Toronto Declaration, and the Asilomar AI principles. And it would also increase consistency within Canadian law, as the Directive on Automated Decision-Making repeatedly refers to individuals or communities. My second recommendation is that the CPPA must recognize inferences as personal information. We live in a world where things as sensitive and dangerous as our sexuality or ethnicity and our political affiliation can be inferred from things as inoffensive as our Spotify listens or coffee orders and our text messages. And those are just some of the inferences that we know about. Inferences can even be harmful when they are incorrect. TransUnion, for example, the credit rating agency, was sued in the United States a couple of years ago for mistakenly inferring that hundreds of people were terrorists. By supercharging inferences, AI has transformed the privacy landscape. We cannot afford to have a privacy statute that focuses on disclosed information, builds a backdoor into our privacy law that strips it from its power to create meaningful protection in today's inferential economy. The CPPA doesn't rule out inference as being personal information, but it doesn't incorporate them explicitly. It should. So I urge the committee to amend the definition of personal information in 2.1 of the Act to say personal information means disclosed or inferred information about an identifiable individual or group. This change would also increase consistency within Canadian law, as the Office of the Privacy Commissioner has repeatedly stated that inferences should be personal information, and with the international standards, as foreign data protection authorities emphasize the importance of inferences for privacy law, and the California Attorney General has also stated that inferences should be personal information for the purposes of privacy law. My third briefer recommendation is the consequence of these two, which is reforming enforcement. As AI and data continue to seep into more aspects of our social and economic lives, one regulator with limited resources and personnel will not be able to have their eye on everything. They will need to prioritize. So if we don't want all other harms to fall through the cracks, both parts of the Act need a combined public and private enforcement system, taking inspiration from the GDPR, where we have an agency that issues fines without preventing the court system from compensating from tangible and intangible harm done to individuals and groups. I'll submit a brief elaborating on the suggestions outlined here, and I'd be happy to address any questions and aspects that you'd like me to elaborate on, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. Je passerai maintenant la parole à Madame.
And now I'd like to give the floor to Ms. Regis, 5 minutes. Good morning. First of all, I would like to thank the chairman and the members of the committee for giving me the opportunity to present my comments on Bill C-27. I'm a full professor at the Faculty of Law at Université de Montréal, and I hold the Canada Chair in IA and a Canadian Research Chair in Health and Law Policy. From January 22 to December 23, I co-chaired the AI working group responsible for the Global Partnership on AI. My comments relate to the AI section of the bill, namely ADA. As a first comment, I'd like to reaffirm not only the importance, but also the urgency of providing a better legal framework for AI, as this bill proposes to do. I've held this position for 5 years, and I'm even more convinced of it today with recent meteoric developments in AI, which we're all familiar with. We need binding legal instruments that clearly define our expectations, values, and requirements across the country when it comes to AI. And during the public consultations that led to the drafting of the Montreal Declaration on Responsible AI, the need for appropriate legislative frameworks was mentioned as the number one demand to create trustworthy AI. And as you probably know, there's a broader trend on a global scale, the most obvious case of which is certainly the EU, which has taken another step just last week towards adopting its regulation on AI. So in addition to the need at the national level, discussions and consequent decisions will be taken on a global scale that will have an impact on all countries. Canada must be able to influence this if it wants to have a chance to ensure that Canadian values and interests are taken into account in an international arena. So establishing a clear and solid vision and standards at the Canadian level is one of the essential conditions to play a credible, structuring, and influential role in global governance. But that said, there are still a number of improvements that can be made to this bill, and I'm going to target 2 today. The first, I think we have to make the AI and Data Commissioner more independent. And although there have been improvements with recent amendments, the Commissioner remains closely tied to the Department for Innovation, Science and Industry to avoid any appearance of conflicts of interest or real conflicts. The two entities need to be further separated to avoid creating tensions between the role of funder on the one hand and industry on the other. For example, the following actions could be considered. Completely separate the Commissioner from the Department. Clearly empower the Commissioner to impose administrative monetary penalties or force corrective action under the accountability framework. Ask the Commissioner to make recommendations on the regulations to be adopted or amended on the basis of his experience. or his annual public report. Other possible measures ensure that the commissioner, once the bill is adopted, has the necessary financial and institutional means and qualified staff to carry out his functions so that the commissioner can attain the objectives. Also, to ensure citizens' access to the commissioner, so maybe to create ties in that way. And other improvements is, I think we have to further affirm the key role that of people's rights might play in the analysis of the risk and impacts on AI. And while the consideration of these rights is specifically mentioned as important in defining high-impact AI classes, the need to subsequently incorporate them into business assessments, including for analysis of risks of harm or adverse effects. This is a bit too timid. I therefore recommend adding specific reference to the need to carry out impact assessments on the rights of individuals likely to be affected by high-impact AI systems, part of which could be made public, what we sometimes call human rights impact assessments. The Council of Europe and the EU and the AI Act and even UNESCO are working on similar tools, and these are of interest. So this recommendation is fundamental because if the race to develop AI is real, no one is going to be a winner in this race to violate human rights. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And now, Elisa Strom.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair.
My name is Alyssa Strom, and I am the Executive Director of the Pan-Canadian AI Strategy at the Canadian Institute for Advanced Research, or CIFAR. Je vous remercie de m'avoir donné.
I would like to thank you for giving me this opportunity to meet with the committee today.
CIFAR is a Canadian-based global research organization that brings together brilliant people across disciplines and borders to address some of the most pressing problems facing science and humanity. Our programs span all areas of human discovery. CIFAR's focus on pushing scientific boundaries allowed us to recognize the promise of an idea that Geoffrey Hinton came to us with in 2004, to build a new CIFAR research program that would advance the concept of artificial neural networks. At the time, this concept was unpopular and difficult to find funding to pursue. 20 years later, this CIFAR program continues to put Canada on the global stage of leading-edge AI research and counts Professors Hinton, Professor Yoshua Bengio, who's here with us today, Richard Sutton at the University of Alberta, and many other leading researchers as members. Due to this early foresight and our deep relationships, in 2017, CIFAR was asked to lead the Pan-Canadian AI strategy. We continue to work with our many partners across the country and across sectors to build a robust and interconnected AI ecosystem around the central hubs of our three national AI institutes, AMI in Edmonton, Mila in Montreal, and the Vector Institute in Toronto. There are now more than 140,000 people working in the highly skilled field of AI across the country. But while the Pan-Canadian AI strategy has delivered on its initial promise to build a deep pool of AI talent and a robust ecosystem, Canada has not kept up in our regulatory approaches and infrastructure. I will highlight three priorities for the work of this committee and ongoing efforts. First, speed. We cannot delay the work of AI regulation. Canada must move quickly to advance our regulatory bodies and processes and work collaboratively at an international level to ensure that Canada's responsible AI framework is coordinated with our partners. We must also understand that regulation will not hinder innovation, but will enhance it, providing greater stability and ensuring interoperability and competitiveness of Canadian-led AI products and services on the global stage. Second, flexibility. The approach we take must be able to adapt to a fast-changing technology and global context. So much is at stake with the potential for AI to be incorporated in virtually every type of business or service. As the AI and Data Act reflects, these effects can be high impact. This means we must take an inclusive approach to this work across all sectors with ongoing public engagement to ensure citizen buy-in in parallel with the development and refinement of these regulations. We also must understand that AI is not contained within borders. This is why we must have systems for monitoring and adapting to the global context. We must also adapt to the advances and potentially unanticipated uses and capabilities of the technology. And this is where collaboration with our global partners will continue to be key and will call upon the strengths of Canada's research community, not only in ways to advance AI safety, but also in the ethical and legal frameworks that must guide it. Third, investment. Canada must make significant investments in infrastructure, systems, and qualified personnel for meaningful AI regulation when used in high impact systems. We were glad to see this defined in the amendments to the Act. Just like the US and the UK, our governments must staff up with the expertise to understand the technology and its impacts. For Canada to remain a leader in advancing responsible AI, Canadian companies and public sector institutions must also have access to the funding and computing power they need to stay at the leading edge of AI. Again, the US, UK, and other G7 countries have a head start on us, having already pledged deep investments in computing infrastructure to support their AI ecosystems, and Canada must do the same. I won't pretend that this work won't be resource intensive, it will be, but we are at an inflection point in the evolution of artificial intelligence. And if we get regulation right, Canada and the world can benefit from its immense potential. To conclude, Canada has tremendous strengths in our research excellence, deep talent pool, and rich interconnected ecosystem. But we must act smartly and decisively now. Getting our regulatory framework, infrastructure, and systems right will be critical to Canada's continued success as a global AI leader. I look forward to the committee's questions and to the comments from my fellow witnesses. Thank you.
Je passerai finalement la parole.
And now I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Bengio. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. And good day to everyone. First, thank you for inviting me to meet with the committee today. My name is Joshua Bengio, and I'm a professor at University of Montreal and the scientific director and founder of MILA. And I have recently become the most cited AI director in the world.
On AI in a number of important international forums, including the US Senate, the first Global AI Safety Summit, an advisory board to the UN Secretary General, and the UK Frontier AI Task Force, in addition to the work I'm doing here in Canada, co-chairing the advisory committee on AI for the government. In recent years, the pace of AI advancement has accelerated to such a degree that I, along with many leaders in the field of AI, have revised downwards our estimates of when human levels of broad cognitive competence, also known as AGI, will be achieved. In other words, machines that are as smart as humans at a cognitive level. This was previously thought to be decades or even centuries away. And I now believe, with many of my colleagues, including Jeff Hinton, that superhuman AI could be developed in the next 2 decades and even possibly in the next few years. Now, if we look at the low end, we're not ready. This prospect is extremely worrying. Cette perspective de n'arriver.
So, this issue of exceeding human intelligence is worrisome.
Guardrails, the current AI trajectory poses serious risks of societal harms, major societal harms, even before AGI is reached. Now, to be clear, progress in AI has opened exciting opportunities for numerous beneficial applications which have motivated me for many years. Yet, it is urgent to establish the necessary guardrails to foster innovation while mitigating risks and harms. With that in mind, we urgently need an agile AI legislation, and I think this law is doing that, moving in the right direction, but with initial requirements to be put in place even before the consultations to develop the more comprehensive regulatory framework are completed. Because with the current approach, it would take something like 2 years before enforcement be possible. Je soutiens donc
Therefore, I do support the bill, and I formulate recommendations to the committee on how to better protect Canadians. They are detailed in the brief that I submitted, and I would like to underscore three aspects. First, urgency.
And the timeline for these is very uncertain. In this situation, an imperfect law whose regulation could be adapted later is better than no law or postponing a law too much. We should thus move forward with IDA's framework and rely on an agile regulatory system that can be adapted as technology evolves. Also, because of urgency, the law should include initial provisions that will apply as soon as it is adopted to ensure the public's protection while the regulatory framework is being developed. So what would we do as this initial step? I'm talking about a registry. Systems beyond a certain level of capability should report to the government and provide information about its safety and security measures, as well as safety assessments. The regulator will be able to use that information to form best-in-class requirements for future permits to continue developing and deploying these advanced systems. This would put the burden of demonstrating safety on developers with the billions required to build these advanced systems, rather than taxpayers. Deuxièmement, another important point
Second,
in the law is that national security risks and societal threats should be listed among the high-impact categories. Examples of capabilities to bring harm include being easily transformable to help bad actors design dangerous cyber attacks or weapons, or deceiving and manipulating as well or better than humans, or finding ways to self-replicate in spite of contrary programming instructions. And finally, my last main point concerns the need for pre-deployment requirements. Developers should be required to register their system and demonstrate its safety and security even before the system is fully trained and developed and before deployment. We need to address and target the risks that emerge earlier in an AI's life cycle, which the current law doesn't seem to do. Pour conclure, j'accueillerai avec...
In conclusion, I would welcome comments and questions from the committee members, as well as exchanges with the colleagues. And thank you for organizing this important discussion.
Thank you very much. And now to start our conversation, I'll yield the floor to MP Perkins for 6 minutes.
Thank you, witnesses. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The continuation of this very important piece of legislation and some very interesting opening testimony. Originally, this bill proposed only legislating and regulating what it called high-impact systems, which was not defined in the law, but would be defined in some future date in regulation. Mr. Benjo, perhaps, is it Mr. or Dr. Benjo?
Either way is fine.
Okay, Dr. Benjo. We now have two added definitions in the draft amendment the minister has made to the bill, where it added a new a definition in a schedule of high impact. It also added a new category, specifically machine learning, and a third being general purpose. Is general purpose getting too broad in terms of the power? It strikes me that large amounts of AI that will happen in businesses, business process, not attached to individual, the internet or that kind of thing. It's about, there's a company in my riding that's using it for, or trying to train it in order to identify the difference between a scallop and a surf clam. To me, that's not something that is high impact. It may be on their business, but in the end of the day, it's just a business efficiency, but it has and will have a general purpose, if I'm reading it right, application. So does the bill go too far with the general purpose provision?
No, I think it's very important to cover the general purpose AI systems, because they're also the ones that could be the most dangerous if misused in particular. And this is the place where there's also the most uncertainty about the harms that could follow from these systems. Now, I think by having a law that says something where more oversight is necessary for these general purpose systems will also be an encouragement for the developers to create more specialized systems. In fact, in most applications in business and science or medicine, we actually want a system that's very specialized. There's one particular kind of question we care about. And until recently, these were the only kinds of AI systems, of course, that were known how to build. But the general purpose systems like the large language models can be specialized, can be turned into something specific that doesn't know everything about the world, but only some specific question, in which case they become much more innocuous.
Thank you. Mr. Kofioni, I've got a question around your discussion about groups and larger harms. We've had some witnesses way back at the beginning of this bill from Jim Balsillie on talk about the fact that the bill is absent in dealing with both on privacy and on artificial intelligence, group harms and group risks. I wonder if you could expand that a little more. And what would you see needed to be added? You mentioned section 5.1 of ADA. Can you share with us a little more what you had in mind?
Of course, yeah. The Directive on Automated Decision-Making explicitly recognizes that harms can be done to individuals or communities, but ADA, when it defines harm in 5.1, it has repeated references to individuals for property, economic, physical, and psychological harm. The thing is that AI harms, by their nature, are often diffuse, so oftentimes they are to groups and not to individuals. For a good example of this, think of AI bias, which is covered in 5.2, not in 5.1. But if you have an automated system that allocates, for example, employment, and it is biased, it is very difficult to know whether a particular individual got or didn't get the job because of that bias or not. But it's easier to see that the system may be biased towards a certain group. The same goes for representation issues in AI, where an individual would have difficulties in proving harm under the Act, but the harm is very real for a particular group. The same is true of misinformation. And the same is true of some types of systemic discrimination that may not be captured by the current definition of bias in the Act. So what I would find concerning is that by regulating a technology that is more likely to have effects on groups than on individuals, under a harm definition that specifically targets individuals, we may be leaving out most of what we want to cover.
I very much look forward to getting your draft amendment on that and taking a look at it. Thank you. I'd like to ask this perhaps of all the witnesses, maybe starting with Ms. Strom. We've had a great debate about whether or not, as Dr. Bengio said, having an imperfect bill is better than not having a bill. The challenge for parliamentarians is in two aspects of that. One, I never like passing an imperfect bill, especially one as important to this. I don't think there's any merit in sort of saying we're number one, we got our first bill through. But the way Parliament works, it's 5 to 10 years before legislation comes back. I also don't like giving the department a blank check to basically not have to come back to Parliament on an overall public policy framework of how we're going to govern this. And this bill lacks that. It just talks about the specifics about high impact general purpose and machine learning, but it doesn't talk overall about saying, like the Canada Health Act has 5 principles, right? So what are the 5 principles of AI? Transparency, that kind of thing. The bill doesn't speak to that governs all AI. And I think that's an issue going forward. I also think it's an issue to give the bureaucracy, while maintaining flexibility, total control over future development without having to seek Parliament. But I'd like to ask all of the witnesses about the 5 things or 4 things or 3 things that are sort of high-level philosophies about how we should govern AI in Canada, which this bill does not seem to define. Starting with Ms. Strom, and then go from there.
Thank you for the question. So just to make sure I understand correctly, you're asking for us to zero in on areas that the bill doesn't currently address?
No, sort of a high level idea of, all AI when a user is interacting with it needs to be transparent. So what
Right.
would similar types of philosophies, forgetting about whether it's high impact machine learning or
Sure.
general purpose, that should govern all of this in the act, which the bill is missing?
Absolutely. So, under principles of safe and trustworthy AI, there are, there's a broad international consensus about what constitutes safe and trustworthy AI. Whether you look at the OECD principles or you look at the Montreal Declaration for Responsible AI, many organizations have a common consensus about what constitutes that. These are principles such as fairness as a primary concern, ensuring that AI is delivering recommendations that treat people fairly and equitably, and that there's no discrimination and no bias. Accountability, ensuring that AI systems and developers of AI systems are accountable for the impacts of the technologies that they're developing. Transparency is one that you mentioned, and that is ensuring that we understand and we have the opportunity to interrogate AI systems and models and get a better understanding of how they are coming towards the decisions, the recommendations that they are developing. Privacy is one that is very deeply interconnected with the bill that's before you today, and those are questions that are deeply intertwined with AI as well, too, ensuring that fundamental principles and rights of privacy are also protected.
Thank you very much, Madam Strom and Mr. Perkins. Hopefully another MP will pick up where you left off, but we're way over time. Mr. Turnbull.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks to all the witnesses for being here today. It seems like we have some really important testimonies, so thank you for making the time, and thank you for lending your expertise to this important conversation. I think we've all heard the phrase or the kind of cliche that says perfection can be the enemy of the good. I wonder if this is one of those instances where we have a very fast evolving AI space and lots of expertise here in Canada. But then we have people with differing opinions. Some people say, oh, we should split the bill up and do the ADA portion over again. We have others saying that, well, no, we need to move forward. I think in a lot of the opening testimony that I heard from yourselves today is that speed is of the essence. Mr. Bengio, maybe you can comment on whether you think that we should start over with ADA and maybe comment on the importance of moving quickly.
Yes. I mentioned urgency many times in my little presentation because you have to understand AI not as a static thing where we are now, but the trajectory that research and development happening mostly in large companies, but also in academia, is moving towards. And as these systems become smarter, more powerful in their cognitive abilities, they are dual use. And that means more good and more harm can happen. And so, well, the harm part is what we need government to protect us from. And in particular, going back to the question from Perkins, we need to make sure that one of the principles is that major harm, like, for example, national security threats, will not be, coming easily from the products that are considered legal under this law. And this is why the high impact category and maybe the different ways that it could be spelled out is so important.
Thank you. And maybe I'll stick with you, Mr. Bengio, for the moment, but I wanted to also ask you, what are the risks to Canadians if AI is not regulated sooner rather than later? I mean, you mentioned the idea that there's more good and more harm that can be done, but in the absence of any regulation and any law, what are the potential harms as you see it?
So maybe the shortest term concern that was a priority, for example, for the experts consulted by the World Economic Forum just a few weeks ago, is disinformation. The use of AI, for example, currently with deepfakes, to imitate images of people, their voices, their rendering, in movement, in video, and interacting with people through texts, through dialogue, in a way that can fool a social media user and make them change their mind on political questions. So there's real concern about the use of AI in kind of politically oriented ways that go against the principles of our democracy. So that's a short-term thing. The other, I would say, like next, maybe go one more year or two later, is the threats in terms of the use of AI of these advanced AI systems for cyber attacks. So the ability of these systems to, in terms of programming, has been making a lot of rapid progress in recent years, and it's expected to continue even faster than any other ability, because we can generate infinite amount of data for that, just like playing the game of Go. And when these systems, get strong enough to defeat our current cyber defenses and our industrial, like digital infrastructure, we are in trouble, because, especially if these systems fall in the wrong hands, we need to secure those systems. One of the things that the Biden executive order insisted on is that these large systems need to be secured to minimize those risks. And then there are other risks that people talk about, like helping bad actors to develop new weapons or simply have the expertise that they wouldn't have otherwise. So all of these things need a law as quickly as possible to make sure that we minimize those risks.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I also just wanted to mention, and I know that you're aware as a signatory that our government developed a voluntary code of conduct for advanced generative artificial intelligence systems. I wanted to ask how ADA builds on that voluntary code. Do you see the two as complementary, and that the voluntary code precedes the bill, and that the bill would actually really add on to that and further this sort of mission of ensuring that we have a regulatory environment that provides some certainty? Could you speak to that, Mr. Bengio?
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. You're exactly right. Voluntary codes are useful to get off the ground quickly, but it is not guaranteed that companies will follow that code. Also, the voluntary code we have is very vague. We need to be, having more precisions about criteria for, what is acceptable and what not. And even companies, I think, need to have that. So we've seen that companies, even some companies, have declared publicly in the U.S. that they wouldn't follow the Biden voluntary code. So I think we have no choice. We have to make sure that there's a level playing field. Otherwise, what we're doing is we are favoring the corporations that don't go by the voluntary code, because for them it means less expenses with the public. So yeah, we really need to have regulation and not just voluntary codes.
Thank you. I think I got that last part. You got a little choppy. Is my time up, Chair? Yep. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Turnbull. Monsieur Garon, la parole est à vous.
Merci, Monsieur le
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for being with us today. I want to begin with you, Mr. Bengio. You talked about imminent risks for democracy, misinformation, deep fakes that circulate more and more. Today you're a witness before this committee remotely. In the framework we have now, what guarantees that you're actually with us? Good question. Well, it's to avoid precisely this kind of thing that we need rules. For instance, we need computer platforms like Zoom and other social media platforms to clearly indicate whether content, video, audio, text is generated by computers or artificial intelligence, or if it's something coming from a recording or other. This is why we need legislation. It's to protect the public as well as incentives for businesses that have developed the technology to better be able to separate what is real and fake. Recently, we had instances of fraud. Grandpa, grandma, were victims of fraud because of AI created voices. Now, are you saying that in the current regulatory framework, businesses have no incentives to identify the fact that it is fake? And my question is, in Bill C-27, as it lies before us, do we have what is needed, or are improvements needed in this regard? I do believe there are. Catherine may be better at answering this question. Well, if I've understood the question, in the most recent amendments, there is a concern about identifying information produced by AI as such for the public. I do think it's an important aspect. You have to avoid that people are confused and develop a complete lack of confidence out there in society. So yes, we do have to work on that legislative angle. Thank you. You talked about provisions that could be applied immediately. You talked about urgency, Professor Benjo. Something that might resemble a registry that would be tabled with the government, a security analysis, essentially. Are you telling us that we should do what we do with medications? And before a medication be on the market, you have to weigh the balances of the good, the bad, the harm. So, I mean, do you think that these AI situations merit this kind of registry? Yes. And we do that in many sectors of society, not just drugs. We do it with railways, transportation, even food, meat processing. It's all aimed at protecting the public. So businesses have to demonstrate that their product is not going to be harmful. And to date, all things to do with informatics, computers have avoided this, but AI can transform society, and it can be good, it can be bad, and that is why we need framework. There is a willingness on the part of industry, and maybe Professor Regis, Professor Benjo, the question is for both of you. Sometimes we're told, well, industry could self-regulate. This voluntary approach could work. I tend to have little confidence in that type of approach. What do you think of industry's ability to self-regulate? And I might suggest, as the beginning of an answer, with this regulation, I mean, we didn't think of a clandestine passenger who might benefit from others self-regulating for this, bad actor not to self-regulate. What do you think of this? Well, I think it could be a very good intermediary step. It could be put in place very quickly, and businesses can consult amongst themselves. That's the positive side. But then there might be bad players. There might be an incentive to cut the corners if we don't have, equal rules for everybody and mandatory rules. Professor Regis, is Canada a big enough player? Canadians think we are an important G7 country, but actually we're a very small economy. Do we have enough clout to influence? Well, there's the issue of influence, but I would like to come back to the issue of self-regulation, which I do believe is important. Clearly, I'd say it is not sufficient. And I think there is a strong consensus on that on an international scale. It is not enough to have self-regulation. Legislative frameworks have a role. You need accountability. You need businesses to have accountability frameworks. And the legislation we're talking about today is part of numerous tools for trustworthy AI. It's not the only solution. Legislation is important. Law is important. You need ethic rules. You also, defensive rules. You talk about international standards, international business. It's a comprehensive strategy that's necessary. So that's for the first part of my answer. What was the second part of your question? Could you please remind me? Your second question is, can Canada significantly influence, given the size of its economy and its role in AI? Well, Canada is not the United States when it comes to clout or the development of AI, but it is an important player for a number of reasons. In the research field, Canada is very strong and it's recognized. Canada has participated in numerous initiatives, including the World Partnership on AI. Canada is an important actor. It needs to position itself. However, we don't want Canada to lose ground. It needs to be consistent with its vision, its values, and adopt very clear measures at a Canada-wide scale. Thank you very much, Professor. Mr. Massey, the floor is yours.
And thanks to our witnesses. A couple of things that worked in the past in this committee, I think kind of come to light, kind of where we're at right now, and it relates to a little bit to the voluntary code. One of the first things was it used to be legal in Canada for businesses to write off fines and penalties on the environment or anti-consumer court cases where they'd actually get tax deductible of the fines and penalties of up to 50% off. There were drug companies for misleading, environmental companies for doing the wrong thing, not environmental companies, environmental damage that was done. And so it led to this imbalance where it was actually an incentive, our business-related expense, to actually go ahead with bad practices that affected people and also our environment because it actually paid off for them. And then it kind of created imbalance for innovation and so forth. The other one is my work on right to repair, which passed through this committee and it was in the Senate. We ended up taking a voluntary agreement as the auto sector. And so we basically said we got a field goal instead of a touchdown. And we now have this has emerged again as an issue because some in the industry will follow the voluntary agreement and some don't. Some wouldn't even sign on to the voluntary agreement, including Tesla, until recent. But there still is major issues, and now they're back to lobbying here on the Hill, especially because what we did know as a vulnerability 10 years ago when we started this was that when it worked in towards the electronics and the sharing of information and data, it changed things again, and there wasn't anything there. So I guess my question is this, to Ms. Strom as a start, and Ms. Regis and Mr. Benjo. Have we also, like right now with the voluntary agreement, created the potential system right now where good actors will come to the table and follow a voluntary agreement, and bad actors might actually use it as an opportunity to excel their business plans to knock out competition? I've seen that happen between those two examples that we've had there. So maybe we'll start with Ms. Strom, because you haven't been on just yet, and then Ms. Regis, and then Mr. Bengio. If we could go in that order, please. Ms. Strom.
Thank you very much for the question. I actually think that the voluntary code is an important and critical first step towards regulating this sector. And I think it was a way to move things forward and also to open the conversation and the discourse about the need for responsible AI practices, methodologies, and approaches as we innovate in this sector. And so I think it was a very, very important first step, but it can't be the last step. As you identify and others have recognized, voluntary codes of conduct, voluntary regulations are just that, they're voluntary. And so we need much firmer and clear rules, regulations, and guidelines about what our expectations are about how the technology is developed and deployed, how it's monitored, how it's assessed for its impact, and understanding what those impacts might be.
Thank you. Ms. Regis?
Yes, I think it goes back to my previous point, and Elisa is very clear on that, and I agree. It clearly is not enough, and there is a way to really avoid having to comply with these voluntary norms. So, but I'm a law professor, so for me, it makes sense for sure to have a binding regulation in that space, especially since there's a lot of power dynamics and economical interests at stake. And I would say that with the proposed bill, one thing that is very important and I like about is that it focuses on ex ante measures. So, because we've been talking about what if something happens, and the Canadian will suffer the consequences if something happens. So let's not wait for too many of these consequences and really focus on forcing people to have ex ante measure to make sure that before anything important is launched on the market, they do their due diligence and we have access to that. It's transparent. We have some accountability mechanisms to make sure that these prejudices are avoided, and we force that.
Thank you, Mr. Bengio. Dr. Bengio.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything my colleagues said. I'll just add this notion of creating a level playing field. So if you have corporations that really want to do good, if there is no mandatory regulation, then they were forced to do as bad as the worst guy in the class, right? What you want is the opposite. You want best in class, but without regulation, we get in the worst in class scenario, where the organizations that are less responsible end up winning.
I'm going to go to Mr. Cofone, but I guess, the trouble we're in right now is we have this voluntary code out there already. So the actions and deliberations of companies are making decisions right now, and some in one direction, some in another, until they're brought into regulatory power. So I think the ship has sailed to some degree in terms of where this can go. And so we're left with this bill and all the warts that it has in a number of different issues. And one of the things that it's a challenge. And Mr. Cofone, maybe you can highlight a little bit of this with your governance background. Perhaps I met with ACTRA. This is the Actors Guild, and a lot of their concerns have to be dealt with through the Copyright Act on this. And if we don't deal with it, though, on this bill somehow, then we actually leave a gaping hole for not only just abuse of the actors, that include children. And their state of welfare, but we also leave a blind spot for how the public can be manipulated and so forth, and everything from consumer society to politics to a whole slew of things. So, what do we do? Do you have any suggestions? Like, how do we kind of fix those components that we're not even? It's a separate act.
Yes, if I quickly can add something to your prior question besides agreement with the prior three responses, is that environment, like you brought up, is a great example. Because in environmental law, years ago, we thought that regulating it was challenging because we mistakenly thought that the costs were local, but the harms were global. So not regulating meant developing the industry while not imposing global harms. And with AI, it's the same. We think sometimes that the harms are global and the cost of regulating are local, but that is not the case. Many of the harms of AI are local, and that makes it urgent for Canada to pass a regulation such as this one that protects its citizens while it fosters industry. On the copyright, it's a challenging question because, as Professor Bengio pointed to a bit earlier, AI is not just one technology. Technologies do one thing. Self-driving cars drive, cameras film, but AI is a family of methods that can do anything. So regulating AI is not about changing one variable or the other. AI would eventually change or affect all of the law, and we will have to reform several statutes. What is being discussed today is an accountability framework plus a privacy law, because that's the one that's most intimately affected by AI. I do not think that we should be illusioned by the fact that changing this will account for all AI and for all the effects of AI, or to think that we should stop it because it doesn't capture everything, because it cannot. I think it is worth discussing the accountability framework to account for harm and bias. It is worth discussing the privacy change to account for AI, and possibly it is also warranted to do a change in the Copyright Act to account for generative AI and the new challenges that it brings for copyright.
Any time left, Mr. Chair?
You can go ahead, Brian.
Okay, just real quickly, maybe I could get just a yes or no, good idea, bad idea, maybe the long term, really quick. If eventually we got to a joint House and Senate committee that overlooked AI on a regular basis, similar to like a defense thing, would that be a good thing or a bad thing? So it then would cover all those bases of other jurisdictions than just industry committee, where if we had both houses that would meet and oversee artificial intelligence in the future. Maybe just, I know it's a hard one, yes or no, but I don't have much time, and if we could go with in reverse order. Thank you.
Yes.
Ms. Regis?
Yes.
Okay. And Mr. Bengio?
I can't answer. I'm not enough of a legal scholar.
That's fine. That's okay. Fair enough. It's just an idea. And Ms. Strom?
I do think that would be helpful.
Okay. Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Chair.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Généreux.
Thank you very much, Mr. Généreux. The floor is yours. Thank you very much, Chair, and thanks to all the witnesses. Such an interesting discussion today. And for all witnesses, no one in particular. But let's say we have someone who is ill-intentioned, a hacker, a terrorist, a thief. And I think this is one of Mr. Bengio's concerns. This person might use AI for bad purposes. And if we were to pass this law tomorrow morning, what would prevent all of these terrorist organization or bad actors from doing what they do? And following up on the question of my colleague in the block, even a recorded message, used to trick someone, the hacker's not going to say, this is an AI-produced message. So do you think that the bill that is before us might change things? I mean, will it really protect the Canadian and Quebec public when it comes to AI? That's my first question. Yes. Yes. What it will do, for instance, is if there are AI systems that are developed by Canadian businesses that are legitimate, the legislation will obligate them to avoid those systems, to prevent that the systems fall in the hands of criminals. Of course, it won't prevent the criminals to use a system developed elsewhere, but that's why we need to work on international treaties. And we have to minimize those risks. So what the Americans are requiring of companies today includes that. So if we were just to align ourselves with the United States in that regard, to avoid that very powerful systems don't fall in bad players' hands, we should at least be providing the same protections and working internationally to broaden that. Also, the fact of sending a signal, we wanted to, so that users can distinguish what is AI or not. That will be incentives for business to find technical solutions. I think it's the businesses that manufacture content like, photos or audio content need to be able to encrypt, have a signature to ensure that this is real. But for businesses to move in that direction, there need to be legislation to push them in that direction as much as possible. The regulation we have before us, or the bill we have before us, will it enable us to be sufficiently efficient, as good as what the U.S. has put in place? And subsequent to the U.S. Decree, will the U.S. be going even further than what's in the executive order? And what about compared to the EU? Because they've moved faster than us. So what our current bill we have, and the bill, well, actually, I'm not sure it's been adopted yet in Europe. I'm going to let my colleagues answer those questions, but what I will say is something I have proposed is that there be a criterion that is the same as that as to the size of this distance, the ability to calculate that would mean that systems that are above that threshold now would have to be registered in a registry. That would put everyone at the things at the same surveillance level as in the U.S. and it's not in the bill. So we need a starting point, but then we do need to continue to regulate in keeping with scientific advances and based on criteria that what is a high impact system. But right away we can start with the same thing. I mean, in Europe they have a similar system. It's a consensus. It's a simple requirement that we can use to distinguish systems. There are a big majority that are not of systems not a threat to national security, but there's some that are, and they are in the high impact. And Madame Regis, for Europe, a few points. There was a question: is the bill sufficient? Certainly the bill will help, but no, it's not sufficient because there are other legislative levels, provinces, for instance. Right now, Quebec has an IA report. The Quebec government has, mandated a body to work on regulation. So we have to do more to solidify the guarantees that will protect us. As to the United States, it's difficult to know what direction they're going to move in formally for next steps, but the Biden executive order was a signal. Very few people expected that. It's an excellent initiative. Now, concerning there was an aspect of interoperability in your question. So I think, yes, that is important. How is Canada going to align itself with the European Union, the United States, and so forth? And to talk about Europe, the more finalized version of the text, 300 pages, just came out last week. So I have managed to master all the details, but we have to know how all of this will align. One question I have is European legislation is more focused on the high risk. In our case, we talk more about incidents. So how can the two align? And that is a question we have to give more thought to. Thank you. Ms. Regis, could you ask, Judge Petit to analyze that 300-page report for you? I just would like to add one thing. A small thing. The fact of having a bill based on principles protects us against forthcoming changes. We give the possibility to the legislature to adapt important aspects and harmonize regulation with our partners. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Généreux. Mr. Van Biden, your floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. We've had a number of witnesses before us in a very wide range of perspectives, some that have told us to rip up the bill and start all over again, and at the same time, we've also heard that the genie is out of the bottle and it's almost operating like a Wild West out there. My question is to Ms. Strom. In November 2023, CAFAR published a regulatory transformation in the age of AI, and according to the summary, this report cautions the current efforts to regulate AI are doomed if they fail to ignore a crucial aspect of the transformative impact of AI on the regulatory processes themselves. Can you go over the findings of this report in a little more detail?
Thank you for the question. I'll give it a shot for you. So that report was actually authored by Professor Gillian Hadfield, who's the director of the Schwartz-Treisman Institute at the University of Toronto. She's a Canada CFAR AI chair, and I believe she was a witness at this committee last week or the week before. And so, as you understand, Professor Hadfield is an expert in regulation and particularly has developed significant expertise in understanding AI regulation in Canada and internationally. The policy brief that we published at CFAR was really ideas that came out of ideas from Professor Hadfield and her laboratory, her research associates and her colleagues, really looking directly at the need to be more innovative as we think about regulating AI. This is a technology that's moving very quickly. It's a technology with so many dimensions that we haven't explored previously in other regulated sectors. And so I believe that the point that Professor Hadfield and her colleagues were making was that they, as we think about regulating AI, we also need to be incredibly flexible, dynamic, and responsive to the technology as it moves forward.
So how can the findings of that report inform the consideration as we develop the act that we're considering now?
Yeah, I think there's the important point is the one that I made in my opening statement, the need for deep flexibility. As the technology develops quickly, as the world moves quickly around development, deployment, adoption of AI, the regulations also need to be flexible, dynamic, and move quickly. So innovation will be necessary in how we approach regulation of AI in Canada. Things like bringing together multi-stakeholder groups to provide insight, ideas, advice, expertise, learning from the processes, the approaches that the private sector is taking in order to comply with the regulations under the AI and Data Act, bringing together academics with government experts, with private sector experts to learn from experiences, perspectives, and approaches. And so I think that idea of being flexible, of trying new things, of really trying to stay perhaps just one step behind the advancement of the technology rather than the many steps that we are behind right now.
Okay, thank you. You've been the executive director of the Pan-Canadian AI strategy since 2018. Did the work on this strategy inform the drafting of the Artificial Intelligence Act, and if so, how?
Not directly. So the Pan-Canadian AI strategy at its inception was really designed to advance Canada's leadership in AI research, training, and innovation, and really focused on building a deep pool of talented individuals with AI expertise across the country and building very rich, robust, dynamic AI ecosystems in our 3 centers in Toronto, Montreal, and Edmonton. That was the foundation of the strategy. And as the strategy evolved over the years, we saw additional investments in budget 2021 to focus on advancing the responsible development, deployment, and adoption of AI, as well as thinking about those opportunities to work collaboratively and internationally on things like standards, et cetera. Indirectly, I would say the Pan-Canadian AI strategy is at least been engaged in the development of the AI and Data Act through several channels. So one is through the AI Advisory Council that Professor Bengio mentioned earlier. He is the co-chair of that council. We have several leaders across the AI ecosystem who are participants and members on that council. I'm also a member on that council. And the AI and Data Act and the Bill C-27 has been discussed at that council.
Thank
secondly,
you. Go ahead.
That's fine. I was just going to say that the AI Institutes, really central hubs of AI research, innovation, commercialization in the country, also had the opportunity to contribute and convene their members to contribute ideas and advice on the Act.
Thank you. And I think I'm out of time, Mr. Chair.
Merci, Monsieur Van Meynen. Monsieur Garon.
Thank you, Mr. Garon. Thank you, Chair. Professor Regis, I would like to turn to you. I'm not making any assumptions here, but when I was young, I would watch films on TV, and after 10 minutes, there'd be commercials. I was being sold products, and I was being, influenced or persuaded. And obviously, I was explicitly accepting that I was being sold things. Now, with all the algorithms, AI or not, there are more and more, persuasion or influence, more and more difficult to actually identify. And that's no doubt a growing trend. and if we're being asked to consent to that, but it's in, small print, impossible for even the most educated person to understand what's going on, actually. Would you agree with my diagnosis that it's more and more difficult to consent to this? And how can we improve the quality of consentments given the challenges? Is there a way to improve the bill as it is now to improve this aspect of consent? You have a minute 15, I think, left. Yes, I do think that's even easier than it used to be to, influence people. There are all kinds of new strategies, some of them very personalized. And when you think of, the background you explained. And in the case of children, it's an even bigger concern for me. And not only is it an issue for consumers, which is the example used, but even more broadly for democracy. I think one of the concerns I have is this, being closed into a bubble where we're only getting certain information, a certain point of view. So what your question gives rise to many broad issues that need to be taken account. So that's in regard to your first question. So what more can be done? That merits more thought. There's consumer protection, but there's also the component that can be dealt with at the provincial level. But ultimately, there have been assessments of millions of tweets for people to understand people's perception of AI in Canada and what people think. And people have a very positive vision of AI, but they're less critical. They're not able to understand how it's affecting their lives or the limits to that technology. And here we're talking about legal and other issues, but that, ability is still in its very young stages. We have to raise the public's awareness to develop, a critical assessment how AI works, how it can influence, and how can people develop a guide of self-defense. And you have to start at a very young age. Mr. Bengio, I'd like to add something, if you will. In the recommendations I mentioned at the beginning, there's one that is a red line, that businesses should not be entitled to improve AI so that they can influence more than human beings. This could be terrible. So you need to have barriers so we don't go where we fear we're going. Thank you very much. Mr. Massé, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the things that we keep hearing is that we're supposed to somehow not wait any longer, but also be within the same framework as our international counterparts, many of whom have not acted yet, or we don't even know where they're going. Any advice on that? I'll turn it over again if we could do a really quick round here. I only get 2 minutes and a half, so maybe start again with Mr. Cofone and then go around, and any advice as to how we even err on that? Because that's what we're doing. We've been told, hurry up, wait.
Yes, I think part of the answer to that is correctly following the risk-based approach that this act is taking, because a risk-based approach that is based on standards rather than trying to do specific rules for specific technologies that we have now versus the ones that we'll have in 5 years, will be able to adjust as the technology changes. So while we avoid the temptation of regulating the technologies that we had a couple of years ago and focus on being technologically neutral, but at the same time putting enough content into the bill will allow us to be future-proof and to be in line with these international principles. I think part of that relates to the question that was asked just before you about the impossibility to meaningfully consent today to most of the data processing because it's impossible to anticipate the inferential harms from AI. And I think part of the answer is, likewise, following standards, focusing on things like privacy by design, data minimization, and purpose limitation that are independent of individuals' consent, allows our laws to adjust to the different ways in which these inferential harms will mutate in the next 10 years, and is similar to the approach that the EU is taking for artificial intelligence.
I think that is my time, so thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Massé. Mr. Viss, the floor is yours.
Merci beaucoup, Mr. Lightbound. Première question est...
My question is for Ms. Regis. During your testimony at the outset, you mentioned the topic of an arm's length commissioner. November 28th, the minister gave us a letter in which he explained the powers and the structures for the position of Commissioner of AI. And I could interpret that your opinion is that the commissioner needs to be at arm's length. The commissioner needs to have a separate office, a separate funding. What do you think about setting up or have a commissioner report separately and specifically so that you have that independence you'd like to see? Well, there are different models. So this attempt to have, an entity that makes independent recommendations to regulators or most broadly other actors, that we could be inspired by the ombudsman or competition bureaus. So very briefly, in answer to your question, I think it's something that needs to be explored. There needs to be entirely independent reporting, but there also needs to be accountability to Canadians. So we have to examine the different models to see what the best solution is.
You mentioned in your opening testimony that we need to invest in subject matter experts in the Department of Industry. I'm very concerned about this. Like, we know that artificial intelligence operates in not just in Canada, but it's global. And even if we have a regulatory approach in Canada, if this bill is indeed passed, I don't think we can isolate ourselves from the potential societal and individual harms that will come from AI actors in other parts of the world. I remember a few years ago, the government of Canada, and I'm not trying to make a political point here, the government of Canada had a hard time operating its payment schedule for public servants. It still does. How in the world is Industry Canada going to regulate online harms from AI if they can't even manage their own pay systems? I just don't know if our public service right now is nimble enough to do the job that we need it to do in the format suggested thus far.
Well, let me offer an opportunity and a suggestion, and that is that there's a lot of expertise in the public sector, in the academic sector, and in the private sector in advancing and thinking about responsible AI and measuring and assessing its impact and harms. And I think that's a huge opportunity for the Government of Canada to bring out some of that expertise into the government, either temporarily or on a case-by-case basis, to assist the government in developing and monitoring and evaluating the risks associated with AI.
So let me just stop you right there. Are you suggesting a somewhat of a hybrid model where private sector actors are integrated with public officials to monitor and regulate and maybe even make quick decisions on potential harms Canadians face? And I'll let Mr. Bengio jump in right after that quickly.
These would have to be obviously well-vetted individuals with the necessary skills and expertise to be able to provide this kind of advice. But I think particularly when we think about legal scholars, when we think about scientific researchers who have the necessary expertise to understand the technical impacts of the technology, I think those would be important assets to bring into this conversation.
And very quickly, Mr. Bengio.
Yes, I want to add, I agree with everything she said, but I want to add that there already are either for-profit or non-profit organizations, mostly in the U.S., but there could be some in Canada, working on AI safety. In other words, developing the technology to do what the regulator needs to do to figure out what is dangerous and what is not. And so I think this is a better route. It's going to take time for the government to build up that muscle, but it's going to be much faster to work with non-governmental organizations that have already that expertise.
Thank you. And one more quick question for Ms. Strome. So we're talking again about developing an AI regulatory framework in here. I don't know necessarily whether China and Russia will apply, and especially in the context of election interference, will apply the same type of safeguards for actors in those respective countries as it relates to AI innovation and potential harms. There's a philosophical discussion going on right now, almost about the race to the bottom. If we hinder ourselves with a regulatory approach that's too overly burdensome, are we holding ourselves back from addressing those serious harms that can come and impact Canadian society?
Well, I think one opportunity for optimism is to look at the recent UK AI Safety Summit that was held late last year at Bletchley Park. And, at that meeting, representatives from the Chinese government were participating in those international discussions about the opportunity to work collaboratively with like-minded nations around the world to think about understanding, assessing, and mitigating the risks of AI. And so I think we have to remain optimistic and hopeful and open to the opportunity for discourse and collaboration.
So I'm an MP, and I have to remain constantly skeptical because I'm thinking about what my 1-year-old. A lot of us have kids on this around this table here, and I'm thinking you hear these 20-year threats. My daughter's going to be 21 in 20 years. The world that she's going to enter, it's crazy, and I don't know if a regulatory approach or if we can even stop it. We might just be fooling ourselves that we can do anything to stop what's going to happen. Maybe Mr. Bengio on this.
Well, you're right that there's nothing that we know right now that gives us full guarantees that we can avoid all the harms that powerful AI systems can bring in. But it would be foolish not to try and to try to move the needle towards more safety. In particular, we should, make sure that the companies here behave well. And as far as, what Chinese organizations are doing, well, we should prepare. And maybe this is not the purview of this law. We should prepare countermeasures. And this is more like a national security investment that needs to be made in order to protect Canadians against these attacks.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, Mr. Viss, you're out of time. Madame Lapointe, la parole est à vous.
Président.
Thank you, Chair.
You cited 3 priorities for government in your opening statement. And when you were talking about the second priority, flexibility, you said that it was important to note that AI is not contained within borders, and Canada should create systems and partnerships. And it struck me that as you raised this point that Canadian legislation would not be effective outside of Canada. So that point that you raise is very relevant. Can you expand on what you see as good and needed systems and partnerships?
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. I think we have many opportunities to work with our like-minded peer nations around the world. Obviously, we have close allies in the US, the UK, other G7 countries, and all of these countries are grappling with the same issues related to the risks associated with AI. So I think that there are some good steps in the right direction, new systems that are being developed and considered around international collaboration on the regulation of AI. And one is the one that I just mentioned, the UK AI Safety Summit, which is now, a collection of like-minded countries that are coming together on a regular basis to explore and understand those risks and also understand how we can work together to mitigate those risks. I think it was really telling in the Bletchley Declaration that was published following that meeting that there is a recognition, even in the statement, that different countries will have different regulatory approaches, will have different laws and legislation around AI. But even within those differences, there are, first of all, opportunities to align and even opportunities for interoperability. And so I think that's one great example, and it's an opportunity for Canada to actually play a really significant contribution.
Yeah, and it speaks to the concern that my colleague MP Massé raised, as well as Député Généreux, where, you know, my fear is that the good guys may be overly legislated and red taped, while bad actors will have free reign without these international agreements. And do you share those concerns as well?
I think there's probably even deeper opportunities for collaboration and alignment on some of these issues, for sure. And
the third priority you raised is the need for investments. And in your opinion, where should investments first be directed to best accelerate the opportunities for Canada, while also protecting from individual harms and system risks?
Thank you for the question. One of the areas that we're deeply concerned about right now is the lack of investment in computing infrastructure within our AI ecosystem. Right now, there's truly a global race for computing technology. These large language models and advanced AI systems really require very, very advanced and significant computational needs. And in Canada and the Canadian AI ecosystem, we don't have access on the ground to that level of computational power. Companies right now in Canada are buying it on the cloud. They're buying it primarily from US cloud providers. Academics in Canada just literally don't have access to that kind of technology. For us to be able to develop the skills, the tools, and the expertise to really interrogate these advanced AI systems and understand where their vulnerabilities are, where the safety and the risk concerns are, we're going to also need very significant computational powers in Canada. That goes for the academic sector, it goes for the government sector as we talk about regulating AI, and it goes for the private sector as well, too. And so that's a critical component.
Okay. And Mr. Cofoni, I'd be interested in hearing your opinion on what kind of legal onus should there be on creators of high-impact AI systems, and also on the platforms that allow the use of AI applications such as Facebook and YouTube.
I think the main onus should be risk mitigation. And this can go back to the principles that we were talking at the very beginning of this session of fairness, transparency, and accountability. It is important that creators and developers of AI systems take into account the wide variety of harms that they create risks for when they're deploying and developing those systems, and that we have legal frameworks that will hold them accountable for that. I think that also relates to your prior question. It is legitimately challenging and reasonably concerning that we may not be able to enforce the frameworks that are passed today in other countries. However, we should not let imperfect enforcement stop us from passing the rules and the principles that we believe ought to be enforced, because imperfect enforcement of them is better than not having enforcement at all. And this concern is similar to a concern that we had for privacy more than 20 years ago, where data crosses borders, so we didn't know whether we would be able to enforce Canadian privacy law abroad, and courts and regulators surprised us to the extent that they're sometimes able to do it.
Merci, Madame Lapointe. Mr.
Thank you, Ms. Lapointe. Mr. Williams.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I want to go back to a question my colleague, Mr. Viss, had to Madame Regis, but I'll go to other witnesses. I'll start with Professor Cofone. The ADA itself proposes that we create an artificial intelligence and data commissioner who will not be an independent body, but rather report to ISID, the Minister of Industry. Do we need the AI commissioner to be an independent office or an officer of Parliament?
I think we would have enormous benefits from the AI commissioner being an independent officer. An alternative, a second best, would be to offset some of the powers that are now vested on the AI commissioner onto the tribunal, which is set as an independent entity. But to have a better composition of the tribunal, we could increase the proportion of experts that occupy positions in the tribunal to compensate for that.
Okay, and in terms of process, would you see it then working very much like the Privacy Commissioner or the Competition Commissioner?
Yes, I think that we could have a system where it operates like the Privacy Commissioner. Under the structure of the proposed bill, we could have, for example, the AI Commissioner carrying out investigations and then the tribunal enforcing the fines.
Okay, and other witnesses, any comments on that? Mr. Bengio, maybe. Go ahead.
Yeah. I think that there's also good reason to make sure that the regulator is going to not be under a single mission. So ISED has a innovation mission, which is really about the economy growing thanks to technology, but there are other aspects of especially harms and risks and national security risks, or even global affairs questions that really the management and the governance of AI by the government needs to cover. How to do that right, I don't know, but I think it would be healthier if the organization doing this within our government isn't under like a single particular ministry.
Okay, Ms. Strom, we've talked in the past here quite a bit about how Canada has really fallen behind with AI when it comes to IP commercialization. We've lost a lot of our patents, especially China, I think, developed more patents in AI in 1 year than we do with all of our patents in a year. So they're really ahead of us, the U.S., others. When it comes to protecting that, developing and protecting and really being back to a leader in AI for Canada, how does Canada do that? And what parts of this bill may prevent that? And what parts do we need to add that might encourage that?
Thanks for the question. I actually believe that patents aren't the only measure of the value in our AI ecosystem. In fact, I believe that the talent is one of the strongest measures of the strength and the value of our AI ecosystem. Patents are important, particularly for startup companies that are trying to protect their intellectual property. But so much of AI that's developed is actually released into the public domain. It's open sourced. And so where we derive really significant value, really innovative new products and services that are based on AI is by the very highly skilled people who come together with the right resources, the right expertise, the right collaborators, and the right funding to actually develop new innovations that are based on AI. So patents are one measure, but they're not the only one. And so I think we need to take a broader view on that. And so when we look at where Canada stands internationally, it's true that it's a very competitive global platform and stage on AI right now. One index is called the Global AI Index. For many years, Canada sat fourth in the world, which is not bad for a small economy relative to some of the other players there. But we are slipping on that index. Just this year, we slipped from fourth to fifth position. And when you look deeply into the details of where we're losing ground on AI, much of it is coming because of the lack of investment in AI infrastructure. This is a position where other countries are making significant pledges, significant commitments, and significant investments in building and advancing AI infrastructure. And Canada has not kept pace with that. In the most recent index, we actually dropped from 15th to 23rd in the world on AI infrastructure, and that affects our global competitiveness.
Thank you very much. I'll now yield the floor to Mr. Sorbera for our last question.
Merci beaucoup, Chair. Thank you very much. And just a wonderful panel today. I wanted to go to Elisa. You spoke about, I think you mentioned 140,000 people working in Canada in AI. Correct, which is obviously a huge, AI has become a huge economic generator. The industry itself, not including the indirect jobs associated with the way AI. Are you aware of any estimates of what AI can become in terms of for the benefit for the Canadian economy as we go forward?
I don't have any real hard numbers on that, but it's something that we're interested in trying to understand ourselves. So I'll get back to you when we do have that number for sure. But I think that the benefits absolutely are economic for Canada, and we're seeing that in the number of jobs. We're seeing that in the number of startup companies that are emerging in our Canadian centers, and particularly in the amount of venture capital investment that is going into those startup companies. About 30% of all venture capital investment in Canada is going directly into companies that are developing AI. And so that's a really significant benefit to the economy.
And the venture capital is usually early stage venture capital that is being funded there. My one question, in terms of the AI regulation, and I'll go to Lisa first and then Ignacio, and if anybody else wants to jump in this time. In terms of the AI regulations, like you want them to be, it's like accounting, you have principle and you have very prescriptive. regulations when it comes to accounting. And you want to make sure that the regulations are not so tight that it limits the growth and the capacity to evolve and innovate, but also not so loose that, you can, there's holes and loopholes in it, if you want to use that word. Are we striking that right balance in terms of getting a balance? Because it's very difficult to achieve. I've spoken to colleagues in Europe on AI, both at the subnational and the European level. All parliaments are grappling with this issue. Where are we in striking that right balance?
I think we're on the right track. I think that especially as we move towards, if the bill is passed and we move towards developing regulations, if we take a really flexible approach, we have to, literally be watching the opportunities, changing, pivoting, adapting as the technology advances and as other international players advance as well too. And so, go ahead.
Oh, no, thank you. If I can just stop you there, because I do want to go to Ignacio. Yeah. Ignacio, can you just chime on this quickly? I know you talked about harms in your presentation. I'm going to reread your testimony, the Blues, when I have a chance this week, in terms of the harms, because that does go to the point about principle and how we regulate versus principle versus being very, very prescriptive.
Yeah, I think we're almost there. And I think, first of all, it is laudable that this legislation is taking that trade-off seriously and is not going too technologically specific. I think it needs some more specificity than it currently does, and it can do that while maintaining its technological neutrality. We could have a bit more precision on the standard for biases. We could have some more precision on the standard for high-impact system. We could have proportional degrees of due care that go across the categorization. All of those things could be applicable to systems that we don't have developed yet, while giving some more guidance to the regulations.
How much, Chair, how much time do I have left?
About a minute.
Okay. If I can go to Yosha, Mr. Bengio, you as well, because you're one of the leaders in Canada, and there's, we have the Vector Institute here at the University of Toronto, I believe, and then in Montreal, the other institutes and stuff. Can you comment on the questions I have, and then to Ms. Regis, if we have time?
Yeah.
Merci.
Yes. So I actually think that we should not make the mistake of trying to put a lot of details in the law. All of us have little things that we would like to see. Because the technology is going to change, because the misuse and the harms are going to evolve, we need to have no choice but to let the regulator adapt quickly. I mean, Alyssa made that point multiple times, and I did as well. We need to really stick to a principle-based approach. That is the only viable solution to protect the public.
Madame?
Yes, so I would say that the best way, in my opinion, to resolve the tension between innovation and protection is a risk-based approach. And this bill is based on that logic, right? The higher the risk, the more you demand. And if you follow that path, I think you're on the right track to have this equilibrium you're looking for.
Merci à tous et à toutes.
Thank you very much, MP Sorbara, and thanks to all of our witnesses today. It was a fascinating discussion. We have a bit of committee business to attend, so I'll let you all go. And I don't know if you can hear through Zoom, but you're also receiving applause from our members here, so it's really interesting. Thank you for your work on this and for sharing your insights with us as we go forward on this legislation. So you're free to go, and thanks again. Chers collègues, ça nous amène au...
Dear colleagues, this brings us to committee business. I know there have been a few notices of motion that were sent, one from Mr. Williams. Mr. Williams, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and sorry to be a dog and with a bone on this topic, but I think it's really important that we continue to look at cell phone bills on behalf of Canadians, and we're not going to stop until we get these cell phone bills down. We had a motion we talked about last week, and I want to revisit that. Specifically, I think what we've changed in this motion to make it a little differently is to ensure that not only do we get Rogers and Bell to the committee, but also Videotron as well. I think it's important we get CEOs of these companies here to talk about what's happening with cell phone bills for Canadians. And secondly, that we do have the Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry here as well. And I think it's important for him, and I know that talking to him in the past, he's always talked about how he wants to come in front of Canadians and talk about lowering cell phone bills. I'm going to go back to March 5th, 2020. Then Industry Minister Navdeep Bains announced that they were going to lower cell phone bills by 25% in the next 2 years. By 2022, it would save families $690 a year. And with the announcements again we had last week by Bell, or I guess it's 3 weeks ago now, average cell phone bills in Canada 106. Rogers and Bell are going to follow suit with a $9 a month increase, which will mean those bills are going to $115. You know, it comes down to one thing, and that's data. And that's the questions we want to ask these CEOs. Canadians now use 3 times as much data in 2022 they did in 2015. And you know that when you go and look at Instagram and you're downloading the Reels, or if you're using YouTube or Netflix, we consume more data. So cell phone bills, if you were consuming only 5 gigabytes a month, have gone down 25%. But Canadians consume more data, and cell phone bills are going up. So these are good questions to ask, I think, on behalf of all Canadians. So my motion reads as follows. As Canadians already pay the highest cell phone bills in the world, and Rogers and Bell have indicated increase to cell phone bills of $9 a month, the committee called for 2 meetings held by February 15, 2024, one with the CEOs of Rogers, Videotron, and Bell, and the second with the Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry to explain why prices are going up, and this committee also condemned price increases and report back to the House. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you, Mr. Williams. I recognize Mr. Massé wants to intervene on the motion before the committee. Mr. Massé.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I do support the motion. Would ask that we add TELUS. Then we have the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse in front of us. So to me, it's an important motion, and we should be reporting this back to the House as well to give as much attention as possible to this issue. It's just become outrageous. So support the motion. Hope we can get this done and have TELUS as well, too, included.
Okay, so that's an amendment, Mr. Massé, and as you all know, there is no such thing as a friendly amendment, so it is an amendment to add TELUS to the list you've so eloquently described of Mr. Massé. So on the amendment of adding TELUS, are there any comments on this, or is there a consensus for this amendment to the motion? Mr. Turnbull.
I have no issue adding TELUS to the motion, but I have a bit of an issue with the motion in general, so perhaps I'll save my comments if we want to vote on the amendment first, because I have no issue.
I think that'll be probably more procedurally elegant if we proceed that way. So if there's,
I always value procedural elegance.
Yeah. I try, but I don't always succeed. So I think there is general consensus looking around the room for just this minor tweak to the motion of adding TELUS. So back to the main motion as amended. Mr. Turnbull.
Just to start, I'm not sure, given our subcommittee's report, which we did, so we had a great subcommittee meeting. Obviously, it was in camera, so I won't speak to the conversation, but the committee report is public, right? It includes a very substantive study that Mr. Lemire put forward originally, and that we sort of agreed to commence with. It also included point 5 here, which includes all of the CEOs, I believe, of all of the companies, including TELUS. So we already actually have agreed to ensure that we bring forward the CEOs to question them on cell phone bills. So I'm looking at point 5 in the committee report, the subcommittee report that came back to this, which had consensus. So I also understand that based on our current committee schedule, that we have dates and sort of times to make sure that those meetings happen. So the way I feel about this is that it seems that Mr. Williams is just trying to push up something that's going to happen anyway that we already agreed to. So I don't see the rationale for that when we've already come to consensus on this. We've all agreed it's an important topic. We've all agreed that there's concerns around cell phone price increases that are planned by Rogers and or others. We also can get more acquainted with the facts because there's lots of other information we need to look at. There's a whole spectrum of other issues that we can talk about. But all of those are already included in the subcommittee report and its motion. And from my understanding that we agreed that meetings would start as early as February 26th, I believe, on this topic. So Mr. Williams' motion, I believe, just bumps it up and is now calling to have those meetings about a week or 10 days earlier. So what's the rationale for that? Why would this committee need to bump that up by 2 weeks or 10 days when we've already agreed to do it in due course, which we've agreed to? We also have other studies that we've talked about that we've had that conversation together and agreed. We came to consensus. And I don't want to, so does this seems like it blows up the consensus that we had. We had a very constructive conversation to achieve consensus, and I thought we had a way forward, and now we've got a motion that tries to bump this study up by 10 days. What is the rationale for that? I can't understand it. Please, someone clarify for me. Maybe Mr. Williams can clarify what the rationale for that is.
So I'm looking around the room if there are more interventions. It is true that in the steering committee we did agree to start the telco study on the 26th. That's correct, and to finish the C27 witnesses before we adjourn for the constituency week in February. But I'll let Mr. Williams speak to his motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, I know that we've agreed to a broader study on telecommunications, which, talks about infrastructure and talks about the problems we've had with companies. This is specific to prices increased by Rogers, announced by Rogers and by Bell. And of course, we're agreeing with the committee to bring other witnesses, the four horsemen or others, together in front of committee because this is needed now and it's pertinent now. We've tried this 3 times. This is the 3rd time we're trying this motion to get committees together. There's a broader study in telecommunications that's talking about infrastructure. That's going to talk about wireless. That's going to talk about many Canadians who do not still have access to cell phone and to signal. I know that there's 7 million Canadians who have been promised high-speed internet access. That's 50% of Canada who still do not have access to that access. So at the end of the day, this is about one topic only, increased by Rogers. That's been announced, getting those CEOs and the minister together on that increase. Why that's important? I'll tell you why. Today, just this morning at 11 o'clock, Manulife, which had announced last week that it was going to only offer specialty drug medication to Loblaws, which was going to be a problem with exclusive deal because of pressure, actually backed off today and announced that they are not going to follow through with that deal. That's what happens when we work together and put political pressure on these companies. Rogers needs to answer now, not in 4 weeks, not in 6 weeks. They need to answer within 2 weeks why they're increasing prices to Canadians now. We should be able doing this now and not waiting. Thank you.
Okay, I'll turn it over to Mr. Turnbull, and just a small thing to keep in mind, just in terms of scheduling, we have witnesses lined up on C27 on February 12 and 14. So should this motion be adopted, I would suggest we try to seek additional resources so as to not, change or undo the great work that our clerk has done to get these witnesses before the committee. So that's just to keep in mind. Mr. Turnbull.
Yeah, I mean, no one's disagreeing with the fact that cell phone companies should be called before the committee and questioned on any planned increases. I think we've all agreed to that. That's actually in the subcommittee report. I think it's actually more substantive, already includes the CEO of TELUS, Quebec Core Media, et cetera, et cetera. It includes all the CEOs of all the companies that have been mentioned. So what I'm not it also includes a focus on increased customer cell phone bills. So it's already there. I think we've already agreed to do this work. So I'm not sure I still can't understand the rationale for an additional motion that just bumps this up. If you're asking for additional committee resources to start that component of the broader study earlier, okay, fine, but then isn't it subject to committee resources? And if we've asked for additional resources to study C27, then why shouldn't that be the first priority, which is what we agreed to? So we've already agreed to that. We already had that debate and conversation, and we agreed to what's in the subcommittee report. So why is this now, even though we've already agreed to it, it's now somehow even a higher priority because you just decided in the last week? or so. I mean, it doesn't make sense to me when we've already agreed to do a broader study, we've agreed to call all the witnesses, we've agreed to focus on cell phone prices and bills, and we've agreed that that could be the first priority in that broader study. And we've also agreed to a report of findings and recommendations back to the House. So I just can't understand what in a way, isn't this a redundant motion? Like, we've already done this. Isn't there some rule in the standing orders that a motion has to be substantively different in order for its consideration? Because this doesn't seem different at all. I don't see anything that's different here. I really can't understand the rationale for this, other than a bit of a grandstand.
Thank you, Mr. Turnbull. Mr. Massey.
Thank you. Well, I think a couple of things have overtaken this when we had our schedule before, but you made a really good point about if we already currently have witnesses lined up, and that also involves travel for them and so forth. So I think we can actually find consensus here, is if we get further resources for this committee, then we can start the study earlier. That's what I would like to see. I think this is an issue that's significantly important. Good interventions, but if we're going to then create a problem for other witnesses, that was something we didn't have before this was even tabled. At one point, we didn't look like we had some of those witnesses coming forth. We do now. So I would offer out there that we actually leave this in your hands, Mr. Chair, to find out if we actually can get some additional resources and start this a little bit quicker if possible. That's the way that I would like to approach it, and I think that's a fair compromise to what's trying to be done here. I think that it's a heightened environment with regards to what the cell phones companies have been doing, so we all feel it. That's number one correspondence that I get into my constituency on a regular basis, aside from a few other, like Gaza and a few other situations that are taking place. So at any rate, I would just offer up that my position would be leave it to your hands to see if we can actually get additional resources in this in this committee to start the study a little bit earlier, and go from there, and not disrupt then what our clerk has done and the other flow of the work that you have to do. And if that's okay with the rest of the committee, I think that's a good way to go forward.
Okay, then I can definitely, if there is consensus around the room, see that we start the study on telcos earlier than planned, should we have additional resources, and keep C27 as planned. So the clerk is here by my side, so we'll be looking for additional resources. There's still a motion before this committee, though, so I don't know how colleagues want to proceed with this motion, or if there is an agreement that we just start the telco study earlier. I'm looking at Ryan, Brian. Ryan, I'll yield the floor to you.
I would just say I agree with Mr. Massey. I think that's a good way forward. If the committee can get the additional resources, that we start C27 or this study on telecoms a bit earlier and prioritize the CEOs. I think one difference is, I think in our subcommittee report, we've actually allocated more time to have those CEOs come before us, which I think is important. I actually think the subcommittee report gives us more of an opportunity to scrutinize the CEOs, as is the intention here. So I would say maybe I could suggest that Mr. Williams, I know you won't like this, but maybe you want to withdraw the motion, and that we can come to consensus to get the additional resources to hopefully start a little bit earlier, and we'd be happy to do that. We could reach consensus.
I see Mr. Perkins and then Mr. Williams.
Thanks. Open to the conversation. Just to let you know, it is public knowledge that next Tuesday and Wednesday after question period, there are available time slots where committees, there is space for committees to do additional meeting, as well as next Wednesday night at 7:30. Perhaps just for consideration, there are additional resources in those times.
Thank you, Mr. Perkins. Mr. Williams.
Yeah, and good discussion. Look, we all want to get these CEOs. The question I have is also, because it's in the motion, do we have the Minister Innovation scheduled for that additional study as well?
One second, Mr. Williams. I don't have the subcommittee report in front of me, so I'm just looking at to the clerk to see. Yeah, Mr. Williams, that's what I thought. It's not the minister is not named specifically in neither the amendment to, well, sort of the amendment or the addition that we decided in the subcommittee report to have the CEOs. However, in the text of the main motion that Mr. Lemire had presented, though the minister is not specifically mentioned, there is nothing prevents us from inviting the minister. If it's the will of the committee as part of the study on telcos to invite the minister to testify, I'm certainly open to send the invite to the minister and his team.
Yeah, sir. If it's the will of the committee to have the minister attend these studies, to get the study moved up, to use the resources that we have, and certainly to, I mean, the one I'm missing here is to report back to the House, which is the main body of this motion. That's certainly what I was looking for as well.
Yeah, it is. It is in the subcommittee report at point 4, and that it reports. And then the committee report its findings and recommendations to the House.
Okay. As long as the committee can come to consensus, we're going to move forward with the resources required before the 15th, correct?
So what I have is seek additional resources with the clerk for extra meetings on top of what we have on C27 next week. These resources, we invite the CEOs of the telcos. And in addition, also, we invite the minister to come and testify as part of this telco study.
Okay, yeah, I'm fine with all.
And just one small clarification, because I was talking to the clerk when it was mentioned, do we want, like, for the CEOs, do we want one CEO per meeting or per hour, or how do we divide them up? Or do we want 2 per meeting or 4 for one meeting? Just to have some clarity on that.
If we have 2 meetings, 2 per meeting?
2 per meeting, that would be fine by me. Or 1 hour each. So, yeah. Mr. Massey?
Yeah, no, I'm open to whatever, but I have no problem in putting them all 4 of them right across right here in front of us for that time frame.
And it would be 2 hour for the 4. But listen, okay, I've heard that there's no strong feelings necessarily on this, so I'll work it out with their schedules. And with their availabilities and the resources that we might get, and I trust that we're in good hands with Clerk Burke to figure it all out. So that brings us to the end of the meeting. So I know, Mr. Perkins, you had some notice of motions. Are you okay to bring them up perhaps at a later point, because we've reached the 2 hours for this meeting?
Sure, if we could maybe towards the end of the next meeting.
Yeah. We'll keep some time
and
for.
I may talk to a few folks in between and see if we can simplify them.
That would make my job easier. I would like that very much, Mr. Perkins. So thank you very much. This meeting is adjourned.